Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
It was 7:42 in the morning. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, shining straight onto the checkered tablecloth, where two still warm loaves of bread were letting off steam. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air, and everything there suggested a peaceful start to the day. Michael sat in his usual chair, the newspaper open between his arms, glasses resting on the bridge of his nose, and his cup already half empty. The same routine as always. The morning silence was broken only by the sound of pages turning and the ticking of the wall clock. One of those moments when no one expects any big changes. Lauren, on the other side of the table, watched everything with a restless gaze. She'd been stirring her coffee for almost 5 minutes, the spoon moving slowly, as if that repetitive motion might help organize her thoughts. Her well-manicured nails lightly tapped the porcelain cup but with a fast rhythm. It was clear she was about to say something important, maybe even painful, though she tried to act normal with each forced sip. She took a deep breath. Looked up. And then said, "Michael, can we talk?" Her voice was steady, but her face showed a bit of hesitation. He turned a page of the newspaper as calmly as ever, glanced over his glasses, and gave a slight look that meant he was listening. Lauren stared at her husband for a second, as if still searching for the courage to go on. "I want a divorce." It was only a few words, spoken softly, but they echoed like thunder in the quiet kitchen. Michael blinked once. Then again. He stopped moving the hand that held the paper, but he said nothing. Not even a sigh. He just looked at her. His calm brown eyes showed no anger, sadness, or despair. They were serene. Like they already knew what was coming. A few seconds went by. Lauren waited for some kind of reaction. Maybe a question. Maybe, why? But Michael just turned another page of the newspaper and kept reading, as if he'd heard something trivial. That was worse than any shout. "Michael, did you hear me?" she insisted, her voice tighter now. "I'm serious. I want a divorce. I've thought about this a lot. We just don't understand each other anymore." He carefully folded the page and placed the newspaper on the table. He drank the last sip of coffee calmly and only then spoke, "You stopped acting like a wife a long time ago. This is just the end of something that ended a while back." He said each word precisely. No rush, no trembling. The kind of statement that cuts deeper than a shout. Lauren's eyes went wide. She'd expected drama. She'd expected resistance. But she found a man who had been emotionally disconnected for a long time. He stood up slowly. Put his cup in the sink, turned on the faucet, rinsed it out, like his routine was stronger than that conversation. Then he picked up the newspaper, folded it with care, and walked out of the kitchen. He passed by Lauren without meeting her eyes again. The silence left behind wasn't a peaceful silence. It was a silence of acceptance. Michael went upstairs to the office. He opened his laptop and took a deep breath before starting something that he clearly had already planned in his mind. First, he accessed the joint account. He made the necessary transfers to his personal account. Then he canceled the extra credit cards. Changed passwords. Revoked Lauren's access to documents, systems, and even his company. All of it done with the same coldness he'd shown at the table. No outburst. No text to friends. No phone call to family. Michael treated the end of his marriage like a spreadsheet that needed to be cleaned up and organized. And in a way, that's exactly what it was to him. His love had run dry months ago. Now all that was left was formality. In the office, a photo of the two of them still sat on a shelf, taken on an old trip to Colorado. They were both smiling, holding each other close, as if they were inseparable. He looked at the picture for a moment. But there was no sadness in his eyes. Just acknowledgement. A silent recognition that it had, in fact, happened, and it was over. Meanwhile, Lauren stayed at the kitchen table, staring at his empty chair. Her spoon sat motionless inside the cup, the coffee now cold. Maybe she was waiting for him to come back. To say something impulsive, to show pain, hurt, regret. But all she got was a calculated silence. A man who, instead of fighting, had already decided to move on. That morning, the divorce stopped being an announcement. It became reality. A choice sealed by looks that no longer searched for each other and gestures that didn't ask for anything in return. Lauren's departure was just another step in something that had already been set in motion a long time ago. And Michael, with a quiet heart and fingers typing away at his keyboard, was beginning a new chapter she never imagined he would reach. The red suitcase had been in the trunk of the car for over an hour. Lauren was driving around the city with the window cracked, feeling the wind on her face while trying to convince herself she was doing the right thing. On the passenger seat was a small bag with perfumes, makeup, and a picture frame with a photo of her and Michael from some New Year's Eve long ago. She thought about tossing it out the window but hesitated. She left it there, facing down. It wasn't part of her story anymore. She headed to Trevor's apartment, a man she'd been seeing for a few months, in the quiet gaps of a marriage that had dragged on without a soul. He was the one she'd secretly texted from the bathroom, met for quick rendezvous in discreet motels, and whispered promises of a better life with. In Lauren's mind, that modern apartment represented the freedom she believed she deserved, far from Michael's predictable routines, far from the weight of a life without excitement. She parked in front of the building, a modern condo in the northern part of the city. The facade was all glass, and the lobby had a white couch and the smell of polished wood. Trevor was waiting for her at the entrance, with that wide smile he always used when he wanted to convince someone that life was carefree, fun, and above all, luxurious. He opened her car door with exaggerated charm and made a comment about how this was the start of a new era. Lauren laughed. It was half forced, half hopeful. They took the elevator, and she went upstairs believing that from then on, there would only be champagne, trips, expensive gifts, and a freedom she felt she'd lost in her marriage to Michael. The first week felt like a movie. Trevor cooked elaborate dinners he'd watched on YouTube minutes earlier. They drank Argentine wine with names he mispronounced but did so confidently enough to seem charming. Lauren laughed, enchanted by his laid-back style, by the way he carried himself, by the feeling of novelty. He talked about a business of his own, international clients, a startup that supposedly consulted for massive financial companies. He name-dropped important people, places she only knew from TV, always making it seem like he was about to land a huge contract. She believed him. Wanted to believe him. Because the idea of leaving stability for adventure only made sense if the adventure truly paid off. But then the second week arrived. Trevor got tense and said it was just a matter of time, that the consulting fee would come through on Monday. Monday passed. Then came another excuse, a late-paying client, a bank holding the transfer, a system glitch. Lauren started to get suspicious. She asked if he needed help, if he wanted her to sell her car, or at least put some charges on her card. Trevor acted offended. He said everything was under control. That she had nothing to worry about. That this was temporary. By the third week, Lauren found out that the apartment wasn't even his. He was subletting it from someone he knew and was already 2 months behind on rent. While Trevor was in the shower, his phone started vibrating on the kitchen counter. Lauren, absent-mindedly sorting some mail, grabbed it without thinking too much and answered. On the other end was a woman with a firm voice who identified herself as the building's manager. She asked casually if Mr. Trevor had any plan for catching up on the overdue rent. She asked if Lauren was his wife. Lauren froze for a second, her heart racing. The woman was calling her his wife. Wife. The title she'd dropped a few weeks earlier was now suddenly landing on her shoulders, carrying unexpected weight. She swallowed hard, mumbled something awkward, and hung up. She stood there, phone in hand, the sound of the shower running in the background, feeling her world slowly spin around her. For the first time since moving in, she started to see the naked truth of her new life. The fridge started getting empty. Trevor went out less, stayed up late playing video games with headphones on, and ordered pizza on credit from the corner place. When she complained about the smell of leftover food in the sink, he said she was too stressed and needed to chill out more. On the 4th week, he cried. Alone in the bathroom. Lauren heard it. The light was on, and the muffled sobs bounced off the tile walls. She pressed her head against the door and stayed there, silent. When he came out, he pretended everything was fine. But she saw the fear in his eyes that he always tried to hide behind smiles and jokes. That was when Lauren started doing the math. Literally. She took a notebook and wrote down everything she'd lost. The house, the comfortable life, the emotional security of a stable, if empty, marriage, and the dignity of someone who felt in control of their own choices. In return, she had an immature, indebted man who talked big about the future but couldn't even afford the present. Little by little, her fascination turned into disgust. The cheap cologne smell she once found appealing now made her feel sick. His comments about how rich people are so dumb started sounding like the excuses of someone who never really got anywhere. Worst of all, Lauren realized she was stuck not because of passion, but from lack of options. She'd sold everything she had left and didn't have the nerve to ask anyone for help, least of all Michael. One night, while Trevor lay on the couch snoring with his mouth open, she looked out from the balcony. The sky was clear, the city quiet. And that's when she realized something that hurt more than any failure: she had traded a real life for a poorly spun fantasy. And now, she had no idea how to go back. Michael woke up every day at 5 in the morning. It was an old habit passed down from his father, who used to say that the early hours belong to men who want to succeed. But there was something different about his mornings now. He didn't just wake up early, he woke up ready, his mind racing with ideas, plans, possibilities. The divorce, despite its emotional weight, had freed up mental space that had once been stifled by silent arguments, tense lunches, and nights when the only sound was the clink of plates being washed in silence. Without Lauren around, the house felt emptier, but oddly more alive. He turned the old guest room into a creative space. He bought a massive whiteboard, set up a makeshift office with just a wooden desk, a laptop, and 3 notebooks full of scribbles. That's where he spent hours brainstorming, testing ideas, failing a bunch, then trying again. And that's where the seed of a project took root, something that until then had seemed like just another attempt, a logistics app for small businesses. It wasn't born out of some magical epiphany, but from seeing the struggles of small neighborhood merchants, freelance delivery folks, shop owners, people who lost time and money due to poor organization in transporting goods. Michael started out by studying existing apps. He saw flaws, overpriced fees, complicated features. Instead of quitting, he went the other way: he simplified everything. He wanted something light, intuitive, straightforward. Something a 60-year-old could use with no tutorial needed. For the first 2 months, he didn't see any results. He sent emails to companies offering free trials, but most didn't even respond. An old friend even told him he was wasting his time on another app that's already out there. Michael just smiled. He'd learned that an idea's value isn't about who believes in it at the start but who benefits from it in the end. In parallel, he set up a near-military routine. Up early, coding until noon, eating lunch alone, reading books on startups, joining online forums, taking quick courses. He ate dinner watching documentaries on innovation. He didn't sleep much, but his mind was buzzing. It wasn't just about making money, it was about proving to himself that he could still build something from the ground up at 40, even after a breakup, even after being left behind so abruptly. One rainy Wednesday afternoon, he got an email from a local transport company that agreed to try the app for a week. He figured they'd drop it in 2 days, like all the others. But a week later, he got another email: "We're impressed with the savings we've had. Can we subscribe to your plan? That was the spark he needed. In under 3 months, the app went from beta to stable. Small businesses began sharing their experience on social media. A simple video, made by a delivery guy named Frank, blew up on YouTube. He explained how Michael's app helped him organize his routes and double his deliveries. Thousands of views. Hundreds of comments. New users. Michael was initially stunned. It was like seeing a seed sprout in soil where nobody thought anything would grow. But he didn't shrink back. On the contrary, he hired 2 freelance programmers, set up a small legal structure, and registered the company. All funded by the early contracts. Then came the most unexpected email of all. A major tech company based in San Francisco wanted to schedule a meeting to talk about acquisition possibilities. Michael read it 4 times before he believed it. He thought it might be a scam. He scheduled a video call, still skeptical. When he heard their proposal, he felt the ground shift, a 7-figure offer for complete rights to the technology, plus a possible executive role in expanding the project. He asked for a day to think it over. He spent the night pacing around the house in silence. He remembered the nights he'd spent alone. He remembered how Lauren saw him, predictable, boring. And now, here he was with $1 million offer in hand, the result of relentless work and well-channeled pain. The next day, he said yes. The contract was signed in a virtual conference room, with lawyers on both sides and a smiling consultant congratulating him on his meteoric success. His name started appearing in articles about innovation. Business sites wrote about the discreet entrepreneur who revolutionized local logistics. People who once ignored him began sending messages. Invitations to events. Requests for interviews. Michael didn't answer them all. He stuck to his disciplined routine, but now there was something new in the air. The same man who'd been left with a half-drunk cup of coffee was now being featured on tech podcasts. His name was in the newspapers he used to read quietly in the kitchen. And as he straightened his tie for a live interview, he looked into the camera, took a deep breath, and smiled. It wasn't an arrogant smile, it was the calm satisfaction of someone who'd rebuilt his own life with resilience as his foundation. The journey was far from over, but he'd already won. That afternoon's rain came as a sign. The sky hung heavy over the city, and the raindrops slid down Lauren's apartment windows like even the weather knew something was about to break. She paced around the living room, her hair hastily tied back, her face drawn, wearing an old gym shirt she'd been in for days. The doorbell never rang, her phone was silent, and Trevor spent all his time locked in the bedroom playing games, acting like the outside world didn't exist. Recent days had been one letdown after another. Bills piled up on the coffee table, and her bank account showed negative numbers. The old days of fancy dinners and manicured nails felt like another lifetime. Lauren had sent out resumes, asked 2 friends for help, who politely brushed her off, and even tried selling her designer clothes online, but nothing worked. On her phone, she spotted an old post by Michael. It was a short video with an aerial view of a resort in the Maldives, captioned, "When peace meets purpose, everything else falls into place." She watched it in silence. Then watched it again. And again. Anger bubbled up inside her like boiling water. She felt mocked, diminished, betrayed by fate. To her, this wasn't success, it was a jab. It was an insult from the man who, in her mind, should have fallen apart without her. She went to the bedroom, grabbed her purse, shoved her phone and keys inside, and left. She rushed down the stairs, heart pounding, hands shaking. She got in the car and drove without much thought, as if on autopilot. The route to Michael's house was engraved in her memory like a childhood path. She stopped in front of the gate and typed in the code she always used. The screen gave her a cold response, "Access denied." She tried again, and again. Nothing. The gate stayed locked, unmoved by her urgency. She bit her lip hard, hesitated, then rang the bell. 3 presses. Straight. A silent plea to open up. Her heart pounded. What if he ignored her? Minutes later, Michael showed up. He was wearing a light-colored shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. His slightly damp hair said he'd recently showered. He looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. There was no anger, no shock. It was as if somewhere deep down, he'd known this moment would come. "Why are you here?" he asked, not raising his voice. Lauren took a deep breath, trying to hold back the knot of anxiety building in her chest. "We need to talk, please." He kept his eyes on hers for a few seconds. Then he pressed a button on the side panel, and the gate clicked open. He stepped back, opened the front door, and just said, "Come in." She crossed the yard with careful steps, as though she was walking on sacred ground. Each step brought back memories. Sunday afternoons, silent dinners, forgotten birthdays. She entered the house that used to be hers and was greeted by a place that was immaculate. Everything in its place. The air smelled like fresh coffee and polished wood. It was like time had moved on here without her. Michael closed the door and walked with her to the living room. They sat in opposite chairs. She started talking in a tense, desperate tone, saying that he'd built his fortune on something that still existed when they were married. She spoke of rights, justice, her share of that money. Michael listened without moving. He just watched her. When she finished, he stood up, pointed at the camera in the upper corner of the wall, and answered calmly as ever, "Everything you're saying is being recorded, Lauren. Choose your words carefully." The tension rose. Her frustration boiled over. She jumped up, started pacing around the room, pointing at him, yelling, making demands. She knocked a frame off the shelf, bumped into a vase, which shattered on the floor. Michael, from the other side of the room, calmly took out his phone and called the police. And what happened next, you already know. The patrol car pulled up with flashing lights, reflected like silent ghosts on Michael's windows. Lauren was escorted out through the front door by 2 officers, still unable to believe the scene she was in. Neighbors peeked discreetly through their windows, not daring to come closer. Michael stayed on the porch, arms crossed, eyes focused on nothing, just waiting for it all to end. She wasn't arrested, but a police report was filed with all the video evidence. The next day, a court order was issued. Lauren was banned from coming within 500 yards of Michael. Banned from calling, texting, even interacting on social media. Justice came swiftly and coldly this time. Michael closed the gate, went back inside, and sat down at the kitchen table, the same one where everything had started. He picked up his cup of coffee and took a slow drink. There was a new silence in the house, but unlike before, it was a peaceful silence. The silence of a fresh start. Across the city, Lauren now lived in a tiny room with moldy walls and a hard mattress on a metal frame. Her old phone vibrated with alerts about late bills, unanswered messages, and offers for temp jobs. Her once perfectly manicured nails now broke easily. Her high heels had been replaced by worn-out sneakers. And the makeup she once wore like armor had disappeared from her daily life. She managed to get a job as a waitress in a modest restaurant. She spent her long shifts carrying trays, taking orders, and listening to people's laughter that felt so far removed from the pain she carried inside. Meanwhile, Michael reached heights he never anticipated. He opened another company. He created mentorship programs for young entrepreneurs. He traveled the world giving talks on reinvention. At one of those events, speaking to a packed auditorium, a young man in the audience asked, "What was the biggest mistake of your life?" Michael thought for a few seconds, gave a small smile, and answered, "Believing that peace was something you had to beg someone else for. Now I understand that peace is a choice, and sometimes it starts the day you close the door on someone who should have left a long time ago." Michael and Lauren's story isn't about a winner and a loser. It's about paths. About choices. About what happens when someone trades what's real for something shiny and realizes too late that shine without substance fades over time. And it's about how true victory is quiet, built during long nights, firm decisions, and, above all, the courage to keep going, even after being left behind. Because in the end, fate collects its debts. And it always collects with interest. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.